Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the GD Report. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, and we've got about 50 days, I think, until the election or so.
46.
46. I'm a few days behind. I am D, and along with me, as always, is
G.
the G-Man. A lot of great topics to cover. We talk about this every time that we do one of these podcasts, video casts, is that there's so many topics going on. It seems like the news changes while we're even recording. So
Yep.
we've got a lot of hot topics. We've got some really cool topics coming up soon. We're going to talk about the Electoral College. We're going to do. We had a lot of fun with the 2024 predictions for the GOP nominees. We're going to come back and do the same thing for the Democratic nominees, and we're going to talk about. The one I'm really looking forward to is top debate moments, because we're less than 2 weeks from the first presidential debate right now. So a lot of great things coming up. So stay tuned. We've got some hot topics tonight. We're just going to jump right into them so that we can get a lot covered. G-Man, you ready? You got your seatbelt on?
Yep, I'm ready to go. Strapped in. Let's do it.
All right. Let's talk about Christopher Wray's congressional testimony today, where he talked about the fact that it is conclusive that Russia is meddling in the 2020 presidential election. What do you know about that one?
Yeah, well, just like you said, he testified to Congress, which that in and of itself is pretty amazing, because this administration has done its level best and for the most part succeeded in keeping its officials away from Congress and Congress's constitutionally mandated oversight capability. So that was the first thing that was, kind of an eye opener.
Chris Wray's been probably the most independent member of this administration, which he should be, because the FBI Director Comey still technically should be, because they're supposed to serve a 10-year term. The whole idea that they would outlast any one president,
right,
with 10 years in office, and so. You would expect that kind of independence, but as we've seen from the Attorney General, it's not been there in justice.
Right, absolutely. And for him to come out and say that Russia has made active efforts to influence the election, that's just astounding. And, it goes against everything Trump has said for the last 3.5 years, that, they didn't meddle then, they're not meddling now. And, I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. I'm waiting for the Twitter storm to hit, where, Trump says, yeah, it's not true, and here's all the reasons why. So,
yeah, I think it's interesting too. He didn't just stop at Russia's meddling. He said Russia's meddling with the main purpose as being a detriment to Joe Biden.
Right.
And so that's got to get the great orange Cheeto at 1600 Black Lives Matter way upset even more, from a standpoint that he's not only saying Russia's interfering, he's saying Russia's interfering to his benefit, which we all know from 2020 or from 2016. He takes any type of talk about Russia, and for whatever reason, which hopefully we'll know someday the reasons why. We have theories on it, but we'll know the exact reasons why. He takes it very to heart personally. He thinks it says that his election was a fraud in 2016, which a lot of fingers point towards that. And he also wants to always bring up, oh, well, China's trying to interfere, or Iran's trying to interfere. Nobody's trying to interfere as much as Russia is. And for whatever reason, they want him to remain president. They want him to win.
Right. Well, I think they hope that eventually he'll kowtow to them and relieve them of those sanctions that Obama put on that are still in place. And why Trump hasn't lifted those is beyond me, except for the fact that I think he knows if he does, that there'll be such a backlash around the country. He has no chance of getting reelected, whereas right now he does have a chance.
Throw you a little wild card on this one. Any chance that Chris Wray gets relieved of his duties before the election?
Well, if he keeps saying things like this to Congress, yeah, I think this president is, quick to pull the trigger, and, I could see him showing Mr. Wray to the door, and in short order. So yeah, we'll have to watch this in the coming days and weeks and see how it plays out.
Yeah, most of the major positions have averaged 3 people per position
Right.
for the first 3 years. So it'll be interesting because Comey obviously didn't even make it a full year with Trump. All right, let's move on. Some news about the military police in Washington, D.C. during the protests in front of the White House.
Yeah, so this goes back to the protest on June the 1st. If you'll recall, Trump had several officials from his administration, including the head of the Joint Chiefs, if I'm recalling correctly, and they used tear gas and military police to clear the peaceful protesters out of Lafayette Square so that Trump could walk over and hold an upside-down Bible and proclaim how religious he is. And so Colonel Robert Phillips, who's a spokesperson for the Joint Force Headquarters in the National Capital Region, confirmed that they asked for but did not receive this device, which allows them to stay far out of the way from any kind of firearm or rocks or anything like that, and it sends out this heat ray, which makes your skin really hot, and basically that's how they would use it to disperse the crowd, but it didn't end up being coming into play in this case.
Yeah, I think the newsworthy item is the fact that it was even considered on U.S. citizens.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
they're exercising their First Amendment rights and to peaceably assemble and petition their government. And to me, there's more and more revelations coming out. It seems like there's a tell-all book almost every week now coming out, whether it's Michael Cohen or Bob Woodward or whatever the case may be. It just continues to show some of the depths that this particular president and administration will go to get their way, and not fight through the political process. Use the full force of the Army and the Justice Department. So I think that's why a lot of people, when you hear most important election of our lifetime, that kind of gets bandied about almost every 4 years. But this particular election has that kind of feel to it, to me personally, because I feel like if someone will behave this way in a first term, what would happen in a second term?
Oh yeah, it would be. I would think you would see a second term of Donald Trump to do his, especially if they retain the Senate. And now there's some talk that they actually could regain the House. I think a second term of Donald Trump would be a total move to an authoritarian type of government.
Right. I agree.
So.
All right. So our good friend George Stephanopoulos and ABC News hosted a town hall meeting. Was that Tuesday?
That was Tuesday night, in Philadelphia.
In Philadelphia, and they had undecided voters. Now, after we'll talk about the outcome, but I will tell you a little preview that Laura Ingraham on Fox News said that she rather doubts that they were undecided voters because the questions were so hard, and so what she felt like were anti-Trump and might as well have been run by the DNC is her opinion of the event. But Trump, in a little warm up to the debate coming up, had this town hall meeting with undecided voters, and there were a lot of highlights to this particular one. Probably my biggest standout moment that I saw in the town hall was the professor who asked the question about pre-existing conditions.
Right.
And Trump tried to interrupt her, and she called him out and said, "Let me finish my question first of all." And then she talked about the fact that if Obamacare goes away, her particular medical conditions would no longer be covered by the insurance companies, not be required to be covered. And then Trump went into a monologue about, which he does every so often, about how he's, pre-existing conditions will always be covered, and he's got a health care plan that's better than Obamacare, and it's going to cover more people, and the benefits are going to be better. there's one big problem with that statement, and he'll try it again in the debates. He'll try it again on the campaign trail for the next 46 days. The big problem with that statement is there is no health care plan.
Right. Well, at least not one that anybody has seen besides Trump.
He's had 4 years to propose one and hasn't proposed a single plan. All he's done is he's instructed his Justice Department is to fight for the overturn and complete repeal of Obamacare in the court system. And a case sets before the Supreme Court right now, which could do that. And so I find it really disingenuous for him to continue to talk about a plan. Now, to George Stephanopoulos' credit, and there's a lot of reporters who are doing more of it now, but Stephanopoulos called him out to his face and said, "Where's the plan?" And he said, "You'll have it really soon." And
right,
so
which is his answer to everything.
I'm probably not going to hold my breath on that one.
Right. Virus is going to go away really soon. I think he said that back in February. So,
what were some of your highlights of the town hall?
Well, a couple that I liked the best were when he said, one of the undecideds asked him why he doesn't wear a mask, and instead of answering the question, he says, "Well, there's a lot of people that don't like wearing masks." And they said, "Well, like who?" And the thing I did like is that they kind of held his feet to the fire in this town hall. And he says, "Well, like waiters. Waiters don't like wearing masks. They come over and, they're at your table and the mask isn't fitting right. So they reach up and they kind of fiddle with it and then they touch the plate. That can't be good." And, I'm not sure if he has one waiter or 1,000 that he's gotten this info from, but I can tell you I've eaten out a fairly decent amount. I'm not back to where I was before the virus, but there's a lot of other factors at play because of that. But, we've eaten out a decent amount, and the waiters and the wait staff that we've seen has no problem wearing a mask. And, they've done a great job waiting on us and in our mind, keeping us safe. So the other one was where he said, in response to the virus, he said, "Well, it's just going to go away without the vaccine." And George is like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah, it's just going to go over a period of time. It's just going to magically go away. And then people will develop herd mentality." I'm quite certain he meant to say herd immunity.
Yeah, I'll take his side on that one and say maybe he actually meant herd mentality, because I feel like when he continues to downgrade masks and he continues to make fun of masks, he tried to make jokes about Joe Biden wearing a mask. He's like, Joe wears a mask, there's nobody around him. All these things where he continues to do that. I almost feel like he's creating a herd mentality, just like a herd of buffalo would follow the lead buffalo right off the cliff.
Yep.
And I feel like some of his followers are doing that, where they're just listening to the things that he says. He's not taking his words serious, and the effect that it's having on people, the effect that it's continuing to have on the economy. And that. One other point I'll make on the town hall was, he got confused on the question about immigration. The young lady who was talking about her mother who immigrated here and had died of breast cancer. And halfway through his answer, Trump started talking about, he said, did you have COVID as well? And the lady was like, no. And he's like, "Oh, but your mother passed away of COVID." And she's like, no. And he started giving an answer about COVID. And it's like, I think it really showed, and we've talked about this before, about how incumbents struggle a lot of times with the first debate. But Donald Trump, it's proven he doesn't like to read. He doesn't read. He watches TV is where he gets his information. Doesn't like to study briefing books. Doesn't get a daily intelligence briefing where he reads it in the mornings. He has it read to him with highlights and lots of pictures a lot of times to illustrate things to him, because he loses his train of thought, has trouble paying attention. This just shows that he's going to struggle getting ready for that first debate. I really, really feel that way. And it's going to be an interesting balance, because I know him. I don't know him, but I know enough of him to know he's going to go into that first debate really cocky.
Yep.
And he's going to think he's just going to wipe the floor with Joe Biden. Joe's going to be a lot more humble. Joe's been there. Joe knows what it's like. It's a pressure situation. And I think Joe's going to be ready for him.
Yeah. And well, like we've talked about before, there's a real possibility that if he totally tanks and his poll numbers drop, that he will suddenly develop some sort of an illness or, just flat out say, I'm not doing it anymore. But the first one could be the only one, depending on how
Interesting
it goes.
too that the first moderator is going to be Chris Wallace from Fox News.
Right. Well, Chris batted him around pretty good the last time they did a interview. So,
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's kind of built for Trump either way, because if it goes really well, he can say it was great and Chris did a great job. If it doesn't go very well, he's got enough of a history with him, and he's been bashing Fox News enough lately that he could use that as his excuse. This is
right.
just going to be a skewed, biased process, and I don't want to spend any time with it. So, interesting and interesting video to watch, which leads us to another interesting video story right now. Let's talk about the G-Man's favorite app that he uses on a daily basis, and it's got a lot of followers on TikTok.
Right. Yes. So, just a quick little history here. It's owned by a Chinese company called BiteDance. And a couple months back, maybe a little bit longer, the Trump administration alleged that this device or this app was basically being used by the Chinese to spy on Americans. And it was a threat to national security, even though they didn't really offer any evidence to that fact. They just basically said it. And as Joseph Goebbels would be proud of, they took it and ran with it, and then it became the story. And so now they've threatened to ban it in the U.S. unless it's sold to a U.S. company. And so Oracle and maybe Walmart and a couple other companies are trying to work out a deal where they at least purchase the U.S. portion of the company. And so basically, Trump said as part of the deal, the U.S. was going to get a big chunk of money, like a commission for setting this up and actually making it happen, which, in most people's minds is bullying them into selling their business without any evidence. But in a press conference today, I think, yesterday, he basically said he's still studying it, even though Oracle said they have a deal in place. And then he did finally come out, and when somebody asked him about how much money the U.S. government was going to get, he says, well, actually, studying that, I was told that we can't really accept any money. So once again, we have Trump coming out and saying one thing when reality is totally opposite.
I thought the money for that was going to be deposited in the same account that Mexico was going to put the wall payments in.
Yeah, exactly. So.
All right. Interesting story. And TikTok is such a fast growing app and so popular with younger people. There's a theory on that too, G-Man, that Trump is actually really pissed off at TikTok because so many of the TikTok users were behind the inflated Tulsa ticket numbers.
Right.
And so they got on and registered to go to the Tulsa rally, which made them go out and puff up their chest and say, oh, we've had, 1 million requests for tickets. And they set up the second stage outside, which they had to unceremoniously remove before the event actually kicked off.
Right.
But even though cameras were still moving.
Well, his rally numbers, I think if a state like South Dakota or Iowa that didn't do any lockdown, which are now seeing their numbers go up, but I think if a state like that, or even Florida where he's got a friendly governor, if they would allow him to have an arena style rally like he had in 2016, I don't think he would get the numbers. I mean, his numbers in Nevada were, pretty low. And I think that tells you all you need to know about the Trump campaign is that it's struggling right now.
Yeah, they're definitely struggling with attendance. They're also struggling with cash on hand. They've paid a lot of big salaries.
Yep.
So they've had to cut back on some ad buys. All right, a couple more topics to go on today. Alternative history. President Trump gave a speech today at the U.S. Archives, and I really don't know. I should have done a little bit more research, but I don't know the occasion of why he was speaking at the Archives. But the scary part was that he used this speech to talk about a lot of things where he was warning about a radical movement going on with the political left. He talked about you know, about this movement's trying to demolish statues and tear down statues of our founders. And he called it a campaign of violence and anarchy. He talked about the education system and how he talked about how he felt like that the education systems is being used to really build this radical left. And this speech really echoed of fascism from the 1930s. And
Right.
it was a pretty scary speech and delivered in a style too, which also, by the way, not good, because he was reading the prompter. It was the end of the day. You could tell he was tired. And he doesn't do well when he's on the prompter. He doesn't have a lot of energy. So
Right.
he was slurring some words, and it was not a good look.
Right. Well, I can shed some light on why he was making the speech, because today is Constitution Day. And so he was in the rotunda of the National Archives, which houses an original copy. Now, you can barely read the thing, and they keep the light so low that you can barely see it. But it is an original copy of the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution. So that's why he was making the speech today. And as far as the prompter, he doesn't like to read. There's a lot of empirical evidence to suggest that he is a poor reader in the fact that he can barely read. And so when you put him on the prompter and he has to read what other people have written, then it becomes difficult for him. He's much better when he can take some notes in his own hand with his atrocious spelling, and he can go out and speak off the cuff. He's much better. And so for his handlers to put him in front of a teleprompter, I think is poor judgment on their part.
Yeah, I agree. Probably the scariest part of the speech to me was when he talked about he was going to sign an order setting up a new commission to push a yet defined, quote unquote, patriotic education. And he said
Right.
that he's calling on American schools to install a patriotic education, saying radicals want to push what he called curricula that teaches the country was founded on oppression rather than freedom. One big fact that he did leave out, that an article I read in the Independent noted, was that between 1525 and 1866, nearly 400,000 African slaves were transported directly to the United States. So
Right.
in wanting to push down the thoughts of oppression in our founding is really denying the actual history.
Right. Well, part of his assault was on the 1619 project, which, if you don't know much about the 1619 project, that's a project that aims to rewrite the nation's history books and basically give a greater contribution to the nation's growth, both economically and geographically, to the slaves. And the Civil War, despite what a lot of Southerners will tell you now, was over slavery and the fact that it was the South's economic model for wealth. And if you were a slave owner, the more slaves you owned, the more property you could cultivate, and the more crops you could plant and harvest, and the more you could take that to market and make money. And so, Trump doesn't want to see stuff like that come out. His base is inherently white supremacist, at least 20% of it, and he plays to that. And so they don't want to see any history type rewritten, because that would just show how far out of step they are with the rest of society.
Yeah, the only thing I'm going to argue with what you said there is I'm going to get semantical on you, but you're right. They don't want to see what they call it rewriting of history, when in reality it would be just the actual finally writing of history.
Right, exactly.
Because they want to ignore the fact that indigenous peoples were murdered and pushed from their lands all over the country, and really push down what what happened to the Africans that were brought here. And so,
Well, not just the Africans. So the Cherokee Indians, they had seen what happened to their, the other tribes that went to war against the U.S. And so they tried a different tactic. They went through the legal system and actually won a Supreme Court vote to be able to stay on their land. And Andrew Jackson, a famous quote in history said, the Cherokee have their victory. Let's see them enforce it, and ordered the army to move them from Florida to Oklahoma, and what is now known as the Trail of Tears, where thousands died along the way and were treated very shabbily by the U.S. Army, not given enough food and water to make the trip. And so, there's a lot, if you really dig into American history and you're not biased, you go in with an open mind, there's a lot that the country has to atone for, as most of the civilized world. So you look at Australia, they've treated their Aboriginal people pretty badly, and Canada has treated their First Nations with a little more respect than we have, but not a whole lot. So it's not just the U.S., but the U.S. does have that long history of abusing different types of people.
right. And it, to be honest about it, doesn't mean you're any less American, but you should
Right.
also be open to the stories of other people and stories of what actually happened. And we recognize that there were people in those generations that weren't perfect people, but at the same time, we have to recognize what they did.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And not just ignore it. All right, couple more topics. Let's talk about the Census Bureau. Tell us what's going on with that. And I've got a wild card that I just thought of. I'm going to throw at you.
Okay. Well, the census is every 10 years, it's constitutionally mandated that we have to do a count of the people in the country. And it doesn't say citizens, it says people. And so the first thing the Trump administration tried to do was they tried to make it so that anybody that was undocumented, that was here illegally, would not be counted. And they anticipated that would drive down the number significantly, because they think, the latest number that I heard is 20 to 30. You used to hear 10 to 11 million. Now it's 20 to 30, maybe even 40 million that are here illegally. And so they thought that would drive down the numbers in some states where, there's supposedly this huge illegal population, and would eliminate some seats in some, I guess, in the Trump administration's mind, in some liberal states, and give them to some other states like Mississippi and Oklahoma and Texas. And so they failed on that. They weren't able to prevail in court on that issue. And so then they decided they were going to shut the census down way early. And so they tried to shut it down about a month ago. And a judge came out and said, no, you can't do that. Well, just today, another judge came out, U.S. District Judge Lucy Coe, who is in, ironically, liberal California, basically said you have to keep conducting the census through at least September 24th. And why she picked that date, I have no idea. But originally, the Trump administration had said they were going to keep counting until the end of September. And so I guess this date would get them at least closer to that. The challengers to Trump are trying to get it to go until the end of November, which I guess is traditionally when the census winds up. So
yeah. Couple of real quick points. Number one is, I find it, I don't know what the word I'm looking for. I go back between dumbfounding and just weird or ironic. I don't know, that the one major political party seems to be constantly on the side of counting people less.
Right.
Whether it be in the census, whether it be in voting, it just seems like, to me, I don't know how you get any more democratic, as a democratic republic, to say we should know how many people are here.
Right.
We should say anyone who's eligible to vote should vote. We should want 100% participation in our elections.
Right.
Yet one party seems to constantly sue and issue elective or executive orders to try to stop people from being counted, try to stop people from voting, try to remove people from voting rolls. And it's just, to me, it just shows, it shows desperation of a dying party. Yeah. And of a dying, what they consider as a majority, rather than taking their set of political principles, running those principles and trying to grow that. Because there are things in both parties' platforms that are attractive to people of all races.
Right.
If they're enforced in the right way, if they're actually mean the things that they talk about in their platforms. And so that's the first point that I make. Second thing is that I find interesting is that by stopping the census, they do a couple different things. They're gonna, if everything goes through and they stop the count, it's going to give us bad data.
Right.
There's no doubt. It's not going to be accurate data. And you can, people can not like it if people are here without papers. I'm going to refuse to call people here illegally just because I don't think any person's illegal. Just my semantics again. But if people are here without papers and people don't like it, I can understand they don't like it, but it doesn't change the fact that they're here.
Right.
Right.
Or what to do.
I don't like the fact that when the New England Patriots make the Super Bowl, I don't like that.
Right.
It doesn't change the fact that they are there and that they have won many of those championships.
Yep.
So to me, having bad data doesn't help anyone. If we should know who's here, we should count everyone. And then at that point, then we can develop better policy to be able to help those folks, whatever that plan is. If we put a path to citizenship in place, if we know how our states are being taxed as far as, and I mean that in a burden, not the actual taxes, but how our states are being burdened with social program requirements, and also recognize the facts that many of those folks are here, that they pay some version of taxes, whether it be sales tax, whether it be other things like that when they buy products, they are paying into the system.
Yeah, well, they pay Social Security and payroll income tax. It's taken out of their check just like every other employer.
Absolutely. And then the other point I'll make on the census that I find ironic a little bit is that the Republican assumption that counting these folks is going to hurt blue or red states. I'm getting a little bit weary when it comes to policy. When we look at, it's funny, their party always wants to talk about patriotism and they want to criticize athletes for kneeling during the national anthem and those types of things. Yet, to me, why would we talk about any American different that's from a blue state or from a red state? Trump just did that this week where he was talking about the coronavirus and he said, well, if you take out the deaths from the blue state, our numbers aren't that bad, which is factually wrong, by the way.
Right.
The numbers, it's about 50-50, which considering the blue states typically have a lot higher population, it says something. But coronavirus doesn't look at somebody and go, it's a Democrat, I'm going to infect them. Oh, here's a Republican, I'm not going to infect them. Here's a Libertarian, I'm definitely infecting them. It doesn't do that. It affects people of all parties, of all races. And that kind of division just drives me crazy because we're talking about policy. We shouldn't be talking about states when it comes to policy. But what's to say, you think about it. You grew up in the South, I grew up in the South. A lot of the southern states that are more conservative have a lot of migrant workers. They have a lot of folks who, and in reality, the state where I live in right now, Oklahoma, might benefit from actually having those folks being counted from a political sense. I don't want to talk about it in those terms necessarily, but they might benefit from the fact that the workers are being counted. Texas might very well benefit, might gain an extra congressional district based on representation. But it's funny to me that some of the arguments that they make are not grounded in the Constitution at all.
Yeah, well, and I've often advocated for some sort of a guest worker program where, to me, the main issue is American employers, despite what they want to say, there are several that are repeat offenders. One right here in Colorado, Swift, it has a processing plant. And, as George W. Bush said during his administration, these workers are doing jobs that other Americans don't want to do, right? America has gotten to the point where, for the most part, we don't think we should have to go, pluck chickens or kill hogs or cattle, things like that, do roofing. We think that we could hire somebody else to do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the thing is, the companies that hire those people, if they had to pay them minimum wage, which right now it's $12.20, I think, here in Colorado, if they had to pay those guys minimum wage, the price of hamburger would go to $9 a pound, and Americans would just be appalled. They'd be like, what the heck? And so I think a way around that is for Congress to set up some sort of guest worker program where they could come and stay here for 3 years, let's say. And, they live and do what they need to do for those 3 years, and then they've got to go home for 6 months, or they've got to go home for 6 months during that time frame, right? And a lot of them do. A lot of them come here, they do their work, and then they take their money and they go back to Mexico and they live pretty good, or wherever they're from. They live pretty good for a year and then they come back. And so I think if we could just do something like that, we'd be a lot better off.
Well, we can debate immigration another day. I'll only throw one caveat to your program. I think anybody whose ancestors came here illegally should have to go back to their ancestors' original country after 3 years too.
Right. Well,
so that's going to be
I guess I'd be heading to Ireland or Norway.
There's going to be a lot of people going back. So
Right.
like I said, we'll talk about it. All right. We're going to wrap up real quick, but I want to throw one other thing at you, because Quinnipiac just came out with a poll this week that has the U.S. Senate race in the state of South Carolina at 48% Lindsey Graham, 48% Jamie Harrison.
Right. I just saw that.
Unbelievable to me that this late in the race that it's that close.
Right. And Mr. Graham not letting being a hypocrite get in the way, had something backfire on him, a little campaign strategy where he released, I believe, 11 years of his tax returns, while he's kissing Trump's butt, who's never released his. And, he basically called on Mr. Harrison to release his, and then had the audacity to say, it's been 5 days since I released mine. What are you hiding?
Right.
And so, Mr. Harrison then released his with a zinger. You want to tell us what the zinger was?
Yeah, it said, "Done. Now do Trump."
Right. Yeah, and of course, all you hear out of the Graham campaign is crickets. I tell you, I was skeptical at the first. We probably ought to do a podcast here in the next, 3 or 4 weeks and take a look at those Senate seats that are in play, and revise our number up or down about how many we think the Dems are going to take. Because right now it sure looks like South Carolina could have 2 black senators come November 3rd.
Yeah, it's and that same poll had the presidential race, and this number blew me away. It had Trump 51,
Yep.
Biden 45.
Yeah, so Trump's going to carry that state, and we'll see what his coattails do for Graham, but it wouldn't be a shocker to see people split their ticket and and vote for the president and then vote for a Democrat for the Senate.
Well, my point is that Trump won it by 15 points last time. It's tightened up. I don't think Joe Biden will pull out South Carolina, but I do think people are going to split ticket, because I think while Trump carries the state, I think even there's a lot of Trump supporters who or Republicans who are going to hold their nose and vote for Trump this time for re-election, that they may say, you know what, Biden might win other places, we'll vote for him here, but we're sick and tired of Lindsey Graham. We're sick and tired of him and his business. Jamie Harrison's run a great campaign. Jim Clyburn's obviously in South Carolina he used to work for Jamie used to work for Jim Clyburn.
Right.
And so I think there's some big potential that election night we could be talking about, like you said. And wouldn't that be a great symbol for the rest of the country? 2 African American senators from state of South Carolina, where the first shots of the Civil War were fired.
Right.
1 Republican, 1 Democrat.
Yeah. What? And they're both black. I mean, what a great story that is. So, before we go, I do have an update I want to throw in. This is kind of a great story as well. So, it's playing out in the ultra swing state of Wisconsin, which Trump carried by, I want to say, about 30,000 votes in 2016. And so part of the Trump strategy, although they deny this, is to have Kanye West, who's fairly influential in the black community and popular, have him get on the ballot in some of these swing states to siphon off black votes from Joe Biden. Well, in the case of Wisconsin, Kanye hired a firm to come in the day before the petitions were due. So if you don't know, if you've never run for office, you can't just go, in most places, you can't just go, pay your filing fee and get your name on the ballot. You actually have to have constituents from the jurisdiction you're running in say they think it would be a good idea if you were on the ballot. So you have to get a certain number of signatures. And those have to be into the Secretary of State's office or the filing authority, excuse me, by a certain deadline. So in this case, it was 5 p.m. the next day. And so Kanye's company came in the day before. They had a little trouble getting their signatures, but they finally did. They made it to the Secretary of State's office at 4:59 p.m. By the time they parked, and this is where every second counts. By the time they parked and got in, it was like 3 seconds to 5. They had to walk across the rotunda, get in an elevator, go up to the 3rd floor, and then get to the clerk's office. By all accounts, they got there 13 seconds late. And so the commission that oversees the elections, which is evenly split, 4 Democrats and 4 Republicans, voted 7-1 that they did not meet the requirements, particularly the filing requirements, the deadline for getting on the ballot. And so they booted him, along with, and I know that you have some thoughts on this, from 2016, the Green Party. So they're not on the ballot. And the Green Party, I think, has kind of accepted their fate. Kanye has sued and lost the first round. So that's an update from Wisconsin.
Yeah, there's not going to be as much a third-party chicanery going on this time as there was last time with the Green Party and Jill Stein, who is a very good friend of Vladimir Putin as well.
Right.
And then also Gary Johnson on the Libertarian side, which a lot of people said, oh, I don't like Trump, I don't like Hillary, I'm going to vote for Gary Johnson. Well, a vote for any third party is a vote for Donald Trump.
Right. In this election, I think you're right. So.
All right, man. Well, let's get out and vote. Everybody, ballots have shipped in a lot of states. Have your ballot shipped yet in Colorado?
No, we don't get ours until the first week of October. But I do want to say that I have relatives in the highly contested state of North Carolina, and they've already received their ballots.
Fantastic. Well, everybody get registered to vote. Find out when your deadlines are. If you don't feel comfortable voting in person, get it registered to vote by mail, and find out, I know in Oklahoma, the governor has waived the need for even though state law was challenged and won in court, and then the legislature repassed it that absentee ballots had to be notarized. He has waived that for COVID using some of his executive authority, which is a good move, I think.
Yeah.
So just get out and vote. Like we say, it's not a spectator sport. We need everybody to participate. Thanks to everybody for tuning in again. We'll be back real soon with another topic.
Yep. Thanks a bunch. See you next time.